I'll never forget that night. The kind of evening that starts like any other, quiet, routine, the hum of normal life, and then twists in a way you don't see coming. I was sitting across from my wife at the dinner table, the soft glow of the chandelier casting warm light across her face. She smiled at me, a small, gentle smile, the kind that usually melts the stress of a long day. And yet, something about her eyes didn't match it. Her eyes were cold, distant, almost like they were hiding something, a shadow behind the warmth of her lips. At first, I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she had something on her mind. But the longer I looked, the more I realized this wasn't just a fleeting thought. Something was off. And the worst part? I had no idea what it was, or how long it had been happening right under my nose. We'd been married for 7 years, and I thought I knew her. I thought I knew the way she laughed, the way she looked at me when she was happy or angry. But that night, sitting across from her, the person I thought I knew so well felt like a stranger. It was subtle at first, a flicker of hesitation when she reached for her glass, a pause in her laughter that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing concrete, nothing I could point to. And yet, a knot formed in my stomach that I couldn't shake. I remember forcing a joke, trying to lighten the mood, but she didn't laugh like she usually did. She smiled, yes, but it was distant, rehearsed almost, like she was performing for me instead of truly being there. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but the words caught in my throat. There was fear there, fear of what I might discover, fear of disrupting whatever fragile normalcy still existed in our little world. And then, without warning, she did something that made my heart stop. She set down her fork, leaned back in her chair, and for just a moment, her eyes met mine with an intensity that made me forget to breathe. There was a story behind that look, one she wasn't telling me. And in that instant, I realized that the life I thought I had, the marriage I thought was safe and familiar, might be built on a lie. I sat there frozen, watching her carefully, noticing every subtle movement, every slight tremor in her hands. My mind raced with questions I didn't know how to ask. Who was this woman smiling at me, but hiding something so deep I could feel it from across the table? And what would happen if I finally uncovered the truth she was keeping? That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of insomnia, but because of that look, the one that made me question everything I thought I knew about the person I loved most. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something I wasn't ready for. And deep down, I feared that once I discovered it, nothing would ever be the same. Little did I know, that dinner table smile was only the beginning of a story that would change everything. Before that night at the dinner table, life with my wife had seemed ordinary, comfortable, predictable, the kind of routine that lulls you into thinking everything is fine. We met in college. She was bright, funny, the kind of person who lit up a room without even trying. I was drawn to her energy, her warmth, the way she always seemed 2 steps ahead, always prepared, always smiling. We got married after 5 years together, and for a while, it felt like nothing could touch us. We built a life together in a small, sunlit apartment. Weekends were for groceries, movies, and sometimes late-night walks when the city streets were quiet. She had a career she loved, full of long hours and challenges she seemed to thrive on. I worked in a job I didn't particularly enjoy, but it allowed me to be part of her world, to share in the life we were building. Friends would tell us we were lucky, that we had something rare, and we'd laugh and agree, feeling untouchable. But over time, cracks began to appear, small, almost invisible ones. At first, it was the little things, forgotten plans, a phone call that lasted a little too long, laughter that didn't sound like her. I told myself it was stress, work pressure, just life happening. I convinced myself that love meant patience, that noticing these things didn't necessarily mean something was wrong. But deep down, a quiet worry had started to grow, a whisper I refused to listen to. Our communication had always been a strength, but gradually, it became a delicate dance of words. I noticed her holding back, choosing phrases carefully, hiding her frustration behind polite smiles. And yet, when I tried to ask what was wrong, she'd brush it off with a laugh or a gentle squeeze of my hand, and I'd believe her. I wanted to believe her. I still do, in a way. That dinner table, though, was different. That night, I could feel the weight of unspoken words, the tension lingering in the corners of the room like smoke. She had been distant for days, and I hadn't pushed, thinking she needed space, thinking I was respecting her. But the way she looked at me then, like she was somewhere else entirely, made it impossible to ignore. I kept thinking back to moments I had brushed aside. Her late-night phone conversations, the way she sometimes checked her reflection in the mirror a little too often, the quiet sighs when she thought I wasn't watching. Were these coincidences? Or were they pieces of a puzzle I wasn't ready to see? I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but fear held me back. Fear that I might uncover something I couldn't handle. Fear that the person I loved, the person I trusted with my entire life, might not be the same person I thought I knew. And so, I sat there, staring at her across the table, pretending everything was normal while my mind raced, imagining the worst, the unimaginable. That night, I realized I was no longer just living with my wife. I was observing her, trying to decipher a code hidden behind her practiced smiles. And I knew, somewhere deep down, that the truth she was hiding was waiting to surface, and once it did, nothing would ever feel safe again. The days after that dinner felt heavier, almost suffocating. I kept replaying her smile in my mind, the warmth of her lips and the emptiness in her eyes, and it gnawed at me like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I tried to go about my routine, but every small noise, every half-glance from her, made my heart skip. She was there, but she wasn't. At work, I caught myself distracted, imagining what she might be hiding. My friends noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. I lied. I said she was stressed, that everything was fine. I couldn't tell them the truth, not even myself. Because deep down, I feared the answer might change everything. I started paying closer attention to her habits. The way she lingered over text messages, the way she sometimes paused mid-sentence as if carefully choosing her words, the way she occasionally stared at me as though measuring my reaction. Each little thing, insignificant on its own, began to feel like a signpost pointing to something I wasn't ready to face. One evening, she came home later than usual. I waited in the living room, pretending to read, but my eyes never left the clock. When she finally walked through the door, she smiled at me, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down her bag. I noticed it, of course. My stomach tightened, a mixture of worry and fear. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but the words lodged in my throat again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the possibilities. Was she hiding something from me? Was it serious, dangerous, or worse? The thought that I might not truly know the person I loved most in the world twisted inside me, leaving me cold and restless. And then, a small, seemingly innocent detail made everything worse. I found a note, folded, tucked inside a book I knew she hadn't opened in months. The handwriting was hers, the words cryptic, almost desperate. I couldn't understand the meaning, but I felt it like a punch in the gut. She wasn't just distant. She was carrying something she couldn't, or wouldn't, share with me. I stared at that note for what felt like hours, my mind spinning with questions and fears. Every theory I imagined was worse than the last. And I knew, in that moment, that whatever was happening, it wasn't going to reveal itself gently. It was waiting for the perfect moment to explode, and I had no idea when that moment would come. The days after finding the note turned our apartment into a place of quiet unease. I tried to act normal, but each glance at my wife felt like stepping into a room full of shadows. Her smiles were sharper now, almost rehearsed, and her laughter had a hollow edge that made me wince. I couldn't tell if she noticed my suspicion or if she was hiding it even better than before. I began noticing things I hadn't before. Small inconsistencies that gnawed at me like ants under the skin. A door left slightly ajar, a cupboard I didn't remember opening, her perfume lingering in the air long after she'd left the room. Every ordinary moment carried a weight, a subtle warning that something was about to break. I felt like I was living alongside a stranger, one who knew me better than I knew her, yet was carefully keeping herself just out of reach. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The apartment was dark, and I could hear the faint hum of music from the bedroom. I paused, holding my breath, trying to make sense of it. When I stepped closer, I saw her silhouette through the half-open door. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and photographs. Her hands trembled as she clutched something close to her chest, her face hidden by her hair. I wanted to call her name, to step inside, but a sudden fear rooted me to the spot. Something in the way she held herself, the tension in her shoulders, The sharp inhale she took when I didn't move told me that whatever she was doing, it was private, urgent, maybe even dangerous. I stood there, silent, watching, as if my very presence might shatter whatever fragile balance existed in that room. Days blurred into nights, and the tension in the apartment grew like a living thing. I tried to confront her, tried to ask, tried to reach her in the simplest, most honest way, but each time, she deflected, distracted, or smiled that same unsettling smile. The one that told me she was somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't allowed to go. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. I was always watching, always waiting, my imagination running wild with possibilities I didn't want to know but couldn't escape. Then, one night, something happened that made my blood run cold. A sound, a soft, deliberate click, echoed from the bedroom. My wife froze, as though she'd been caught. I hesitated, fear rooting me in place. The music stopped. The silence was suffocating, heavy with unspoken words. I could see her trembling, but she still smiled, her eyes sharp now, alert, almost predatory. And in that instant, I realized with a jolt that I was no longer simply observing her. I was part of a story I didn't understand, a story she was controlling. The note, the late nights, the trembling hands, the half-smiles, they weren't random. Something was coming. Something I wasn't ready for. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about her and about us. I wanted to move, to speak, to demand the truth, but my feet felt glued to the floor. My heart was hammering in my chest, my pulse loud in my ears. And then she looked at me, full on, her eyes finally locking with mine, and I saw it. The secret she'd been carrying, the weight she'd been hiding for weeks. Only, she didn't say a word. The air between us was electric, the kind of tense, suffocating silence that promises a storm. And I knew, deep down, that the truth, whatever it was about to reveal itself. I thought I was ready for the truth. I thought I could handle whatever secret she'd been carrying behind that smile. But when she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. "I've been protecting you," she said softly, almost pleading, her eyes glistening. My chest tightened. "There are things you don't know about me, about us." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed on the counter. I saw the message light up the screen. My stomach dropped. It wasn't from a friend or a work contact. It was from someone I didn't recognize. Someone who knew her in ways I never had. She glanced at it, froze, then quickly locked the screen. "I can't tell you everything," she whispered, and suddenly, the room felt smaller, suffocating, the air thick with danger. I realized then that this wasn't just a secret. It was a life that existed parallel to ours, one I had no part in. A life she had hidden completely from me. And the thought hit me like ice. If I had known even a fraction of it, none of this, none of us, would be safe. The person behind that smile wasn't just hiding something. They were hiding everything. The night everything came to a head began like any other, but I could feel the storm rolling in, heavy and unavoidable. I couldn't stop myself. I had to know the truth, no matter the cost. "Tell me," I said, my voice low, trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "Tell me what's going on. No more secrets." She hesitated, her hands clutching the edge of the table as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Then, finally, she exhaled and looked me straight in the eye. "It's not just me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's someone else. Someone who's been watching, controlling, influencing my life. I thought I could handle it, protect you from it, but it's bigger than us." My mind raced. I imagined every possibility. An affair, a stalker, something illegal, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. She reached under the table and pulled out a small, worn envelope, shaking slightly. Inside were photographs. Me, from outside our apartment, our routines documented, every moment of our life observed by someone else. "They've been manipulating everything," she continued, her voice breaking. "Every smile, every lie, it was all to keep us in line." Panic and disbelief hit me at once. I felt betrayed, exposed, but more than that, I realized how fragile our life had been, how dangerously close we'd been to losing everything. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand answers. But then I noticed something in the photographs that froze me cold. A figure in the background, someone I recognized instantly. Someone I trusted. It was my best friend. Standing there, smiling at the camera as if nothing was wrong. I turned to my wife, eyes wide. "It's him." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "It's always been him. And now they know we're onto them." Before I could process it, the lights flickered, and a shadow moved across the room. The sound of a door clicking open behind us made my heart pound. We weren't safe, not from the past, not from the person we thought we knew. And in that moment, I realized the fight wasn't over. Something, or someone, was coming for us. And whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. The hours after that night were the longest of my life. My wife and I moved cautiously, almost silently, as if every step might trigger something we couldn't control. The apartment, once a place of comfort and warmth, had become a cage filled with shadows, secrets, and half-truths. We called the authorities, but by the time anyone could arrive, the evidence of our life being monitored had been carefully hidden or removed. The photographs, the notes, the subtle manipulations, they all vanished, leaving us with nothing but the terrifying knowledge that we had been watched, controlled, and manipulated for months. And yet, as we sat together on the couch that night, exhausted, hearts still racing, I realized something important. Despite everything, the lies, the fear, the betrayal, she had been protecting me. Every hesitation, every strange smile, every cryptic note had been her way of keeping me safe from a threat I couldn't see or understand. I reached for her hand, and for the first time in weeks, our fingers intertwined naturally. There was relief in that small touch, a fragile reassurance that we weren't alone. We didn't have all the answers, and perhaps we never would. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were facing the danger together, as partners, as a team. In the days that followed, we made changes, carefully, cautiously. Locks were changed, routines altered, and privacy reclaimed in ways we hadn't thought about before. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was ours. Every day, I learned a little more about her strength, her courage, and the lengths she had gone to protect the life we shared. I realized that love isn't just about laughter or comfort. It's about trust, sacrifice, and sometimes surviving the storms together. And yet, the lingering question remained. My best friend, the one who had been lurking in the shadows of our life, had vanished. There were no calls, no messages, no trace. It was as if he had never existed. The thought unsettled me more than I could admit, but it also reminded me how fragile life is and how easily the familiar can become unfamiliar. Sitting across from my wife that evening, I watched her smile, genuine this time, reaching her eyes. There was warmth, but also a hint of sorrow. The weight of secrets once carried now eased, but not forgotten. We didn't need explanations for everything. Sometimes, surviving together was enough. Life slowly returned to a fragile normal. But every now and then, when the wind rattled the windows or a shadow passed in the corner of my eye, I remembered that night. The dinner, the smile, the eyes that told a different story. And I understood, finally, that love and trust aren't about knowing everything. They're about holding on, even when the world shows you the things you're not ready to see. Because in the end, what mattered most wasn't the secrets we uncovered or the threats we faced. It was that we faced them together.